Please welcome on stage the president of the Hungarian National Film Fund, Mr. Andrew G. Vajna, and his one-time collaborator, Oliver Stone. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Did you sleep well?
Yeah, too long.
Too long? Oh, we are not too late.
When you sleep too long, you wake up tired.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we start with the savages? Or do you need a little time? Can we start with the savages?
Yes, of course.
So you wrote this screenplay with the author of the book, Mr. Don Winslow, and Shane Salerno. How did you work together?
We worked separately.
Sorry, could you please use the microphone? Thank you.
We worked. I bought the book with my own money because it was for me, it was a film that was very original and fresh, and I didn't feel that a studio would appreciate it and would do it right. They would own it, they would develop it, but it would have to be a certain, you understand, because it involves sex and drugs and violence, that they would give it. It would be difficult to develop it. It's a very strange game in the U.S. But if a filmmaker can find a way to make a screenplay himself and own it, or find a producer to work with him and have it privately owned, then you can go to these studios, and there's not many of them. There's 6, 7. You go to them and you ask them for financing. They don't control you though. But if you have developed a screenplay inside that system, they own it. And then you're working for them. So it's a very tough game. So if with a producer you go and you say, you want to make it, I have this kind of actor, that kind of an actor, this is my budget. They say yes or no, you're in or you're out. You put it to them. That's more aggressive. Otherwise you're passive and they will fuck you whatever way they can. And you'll never see a dime anyway, either way probably, but that's the nature of the business. It's a very cruel business. The guys on top long ago figured out the ownership situation. I think what's wrong about the United States ownership system, although we do make many movies, is that copyright belongs to the studio forever. And I think there ought to be a lease back period. If you make a movie and after 10, 20 years they've soaked it, maybe the person who wrote it and directed it can get it back. And then he could truly benefit in a way. I know Andy won't agree with me, but this is an old argument. What do you think?
Well, I think usually the creative personnel get attached to that screenplay. So if the studio does want to do anything later on, I think you get to be part of that. And often you can buy it back or get it back. It depends on the deal you make. But the studios, because they're putting up so much money and because they're risking all that, they feel that the copyright should be something that they can deal with as they go down the line.
Yes, but in a case like Wall Street 1, for example, that you saw, they own it in perpetuity. They play it on TV. They make money, but they never give us back anything except residuals.
Well, don't you have a participation?
No, my participation was based early on in my career, and it was minor. It was what they call net as opposed to gross. And even on gross, I had gross on the Wall Street too. The creative accounting is disgusting, and it's gotten worse because they tack on compound interest daily.
No, I agree with you. That's why when in Carolco and in Synergy, in both of those cases, because we were independent production companies, we always had the kind of the gross deal that did give us some benefit. Even though when we, for instance, on Terminator 2, when we did the final accounting with Sony, they owed us $20 million, which they admitted they stole, but they wouldn't pay.
Well, he was a relatively large company, but imagine a filmmaker. We just don't have a shot in that system. But back to your question, which was, I developed a script because I knew they wouldn't get made the right way, and I wanted to make it. So I found a partner in Moritz Bormann, we found a partner in Paul Rassam Pathé in Paris. They put up some money. We paid Don and Shane. I bought the book, the rights. We paid Don and Shane out of the French money. And we worked together off and on for a year. It was a collaboration, which means sometimes good, sometimes bad. He wanted to leave certain things in. I did not. He wanted to change things. You know, it went back and forth. Ultimately, the director is the boss. He should be, and the screenplay was done. And actually, we went out to the studios. We went out to 5 studios. It was a very good screenplay, and 4 of the 5 turned us down because same reason from the very beginning. Too tough. But this one studio, Universal, was willing to take that risk at a budget of $46 million and made the movie. And and frankly, it was a good experience with them. They didn't control, they weren't pushy, they were not like Fox. They were very hands-off. And I had a good experience with Universal until they chose the distribution date, which I think was a mistake.
Okay, about that a little later. But whose idea was to make 2 endings for the story?
My idea, based on the fact that the the book, which reads beautifully, is a fiction. Don has written about the drug wars in the past, factually, but this was his whimsical fantasy, and in that Butch and Sundance style, he thought it was very romantic for the two young people to lay down their lives for this other young person. I did not buy that. I think nobody would do that, and I don't believe that they loved each other to that degree in the book or the movie. And I think that was a figment of his imagination. So I put the movie into the girl's voiceover. The girl tells a story. She's the unreliable narrator. She says at the very beginning, just because I'm telling you this story doesn't mean I'm alive at the end.
Is it a line of yours?
Yeah, which is a good, it's on the book, which is a good hook, because you know that something's off. So it gets to the end and she's killed, or she kills herself with morphine. She says, this is the way I thought it should end, but the truth has a mind of its own, which is, I think, is realistic because it does. The truth and us sometimes disagree, and we go back to the second ending, which is the real drug war, which goes on and on and on. Very cynical ending, and the John Travolta character comes back and gets as much money and power as he can get out of the situation. The young people are given a second chance and escape for a while, and I think they move on in their lives. She says at the end, among her other things, that I don't think it's possible for 3 people to be equally in love. Double endings are always difficult, but I like to try one. It was experimental. And I last saw it effectively in Fritz Lang's Women in the Window, 1943, I think, or 41.
And what did Don Winslow say to this?
What?
What did Don Winslow say to this? Did he like it?
He didn't object. He did not object.
You mentioned the narration. You like to use it, but here in Hungary, I don't see it in many films, so we don't use it that much. What do you think about narration?
We don't what?
They don't use narration in movies.
That's up to you. It's a wonderful device. It's been around for a century. You can do it or you can't. You know, it's up to the artistic voice. Well, it is told in her. She is telling the story from her point of view.
Yeah, but here in Hungary we are taught that you have to show everything with pictures.
That's a new rule.
Okay, any questions on Savages? There.
Good morning to everyone. In Savages, violence is only the extension of business. Is this film about Hollywood? Is it true to Hollywood as well, that violence is only the extension of business?
Can you repeat? Because we didn't quite understand.
Okay, so for me, Savages was about this one line. Violence is only the extension of business.
Violence.
Violence.
Violence is only the extension of business.
That was the bottom line of the film for him.
That was not a dialogue line, no.
No, not a dialogue line. But my question is it true to Hollywood, your business as well, that you use violence as the extension of business?
I would sometimes, but I'm not going to go cut off somebody's head. No, I don't think that that's what the movie, I would not bottom line that. I think that it's a clear given that, you know, for me, it's an interesting movie about 6 characters. The 6 characters each have their own moral values. And one of them, Aaron Johnson, the youngest, is a Buddhist, and he practices, you know, like Bono. He has a foundation in Asia and another one in Africa. He thinks of herb weed as being a very healthy plant, and it is. It's not a drug, and he does good things with his money, which a lot of people are trying to do now, younger people. He doesn't want to be a bad influence. He gets he growing such great grass. He gets an offer from a cartel, a business, a Walmart type situation, who says, "We want to be your partner. You will make more money." It's not like a threat. It's like, you will make more money with us. Sounds good. That's what every Hollywood company gets, an offer from a bigger company to expand the business. Instead of making $8 million a year, you'll be making $35, $40 million a year. And we'll be your partner, and we'll learn your techniques. So at this point in the movie, very early, Aaron wants to get out of the business. He tells that to his partner. His partner agrees. We're getting out of this business because I'm fed up with it. We can move on. There's other things to do in life, like laptops in Africa. We can spread the good word. And it's a noble intention. But he negotiates, and he even offers them the business. They don't want the business they want him to be part of it because they want their expertise to be there. So it's a typical business situation. And Aaron lies to them, and he says, "Okay, I'm in." Meanwhile, he's planning to split to another country and take O, and the 3 of them were going to go away. That, of course, is what sets off the whole situation. The cartel feels lied to, cheated, and they cannot allow them to do that because it will spoil their plan to move into the California market. Therefore, they lift O, and thus begins the warfare that grows and grows into a place where Aaron becomes a beast. He crosses the line, where he has to set on fire another man who he himself lied about and set up. He feels terrible. You saw the ambush. He didn't kill. He was not able to shoot at the ambush. He was unable to kill. And because of that, he almost got himself killed and also his buddy, Taylor. So that was a very important moment. And then from there on, it's one thing after the other until he gets to that point where he actually burns another human being alive. Blake sees it and is terrified of it and sees what it does to him. Things are very hard for them at this point. They're not going to go back to being the happy threesome, the idyllic threesome in Southern California. So that's part of what I see. I don't see it as violence as an extension of business. I never thought of it that way. I mean, because there's all forms of violence.
Other questions? There? Attila?
Hello, Mr. Stone. My name is Attila. And who am I to criticize an Academy Award winner like you? But still allow me to be brutally honest. Savages will not be one of my favorite Oliver Stone movies. And I was thinking about the reason, and I think I found it, if you're interested in hearing it. Your movies usually, your uniqueness that made most of your movies epic was, or is, that you create characters, and no matter how evil or mean or witty, insecure or lost they are, you still made me love them for the way they are and for their uniqueness. In Savages, I was not able to fall in love with neither of the trio of the 3 leading characters. I don't know the reason. I think I missed the depth out of them. The other characters I liked were not Oliver Stone characters. Benicio del Toro, Salma Hayek, the characters, and I'm sorry, I don't want to insult you, I'm sorry, but they reminded me on Coen brothers characters or Tarantino characters, not the original Oliver Stone characters that I loved so far in your movies. I don't know if that's the cast, if it's just my individual taste, maybe a lack of talent in the cast. I don't know. What is your opinion about that?
Well, I've certainly heard yours. Listen, I like the movie. I like the people. I think the director is playing with them affectionately. For me to set out to say I'm making a movie with Coen brother characters is just not the way I would think. These people all had a life of their own. We worked together. There was a life in the book that they had. And I remember working very closely with every one of the six. The three older ones are a little more experienced. I enjoyed that thoroughly. I think Salma gave a performance that many people have said is quite different than anything they've ever seen from her. And I think Benicio is very interesting always as an actor, and comes back as a heavy in this, but he's a heavy who trembles when he's in front of Salma. And I think Travolta hasn't been seen in a while, and he's wearing a face that he has not worn. That's to say there's no makeup, no hair, no disguise. And I think he's very aptly sleazy. He survives, and he seems weak in the beginning. He's a typical corrupt cop, a slob, and turns into a mastermind of the operation. I think the Ben character, the Aaron, I cared about his transformation. And Blake went through hell. You can't argue with everybody. Everyone has a different opinion. Didn't work for you. I'll go on with my life. You'll go on with your life. Okay.
Please allow me to compensate my negative comment. You did make a movie that changed many people's lives that I know. That's Any Given Sunday. And they told me it's not allowed to do any commercials and advertisement, but under your table you will find merchandising items of a team called the Budapest Wolves, which is a Hungarian-American football team. And the reason why that team exists and why many young people in Hungary choose this sport is that movie that we used to watch on the tour bus every time we have an away game. So thank you for that, and I will cherish you no matter how many savages and 9/11s you will do, I will still cherish you.
Thank you.
So there is your gift under the table. There is a gift under the table. Okay.
Budapest Wolves. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So go on with the question. Here is one.
Mr. Stone, my name is Gabor, and since we're on a writing class, I happen to have my questions in writing. First, allow me to thank you, Mr. Stone, for the privilege and for having you sharing your thoughts with us here with such a patience and sincerity. We appreciate it. Could you please reveal, scrutinize, or analyze the writing process of the two films we watched yesterday? The writing process, how did it go? What are the things that you did first, next? What is in, what is out? What were your dilemmas and challenges while you were writing? I'm talking Wall Street that we watched yesterday with a fresh eye, and Savages, of course. And we were concentrating on the storytelling technique. So which are the things that you were contemplating, telling differently than it is in the movie? And did anybody interfere with your ideas? How did you want to do it? Did anybody else have a word on it?
I don't know how that's a class, that's almost a whole classroom study. You have to go through the whole act by act on each one, so I don't know that I'm supposed to do that here. I guess
We have time.
I can just sum up. On Savages, I worked with Don and Shane, but there was a book. I knew the things I liked in the book. I did not like the first ending because I didn't believe it, but I thought it was an interesting one. It should be done because the movie becomes a cowboy movie in the sense that in a modern Western, when there's a shootout, an old-fashioned shootout with 6 people in the inner circle, inner ring, and snipers a mile away. So I thought that was fascinating as an idea to set up as an action scene I'd never seen before, because snipers from the sniper control. But look, the point is that there were 2 endings, and that had to be wrestled with from the beginning to set up the narrator, who would take us through this story from beginning to end. And the idea was, if you remember in the beginning, they were going to go to Indonesia, and that's where they ended up. But there were too many characters in the book. There was about 200 scenes, very short scenes. There was a mother who was played by Uma Thurman. There was a wife for Benicio, because Benicio was trying to Americanize himself. Mia Maestro played her. John Travolta had a wife who was dying of cancer. These scenes were shot, all of them, the backstory of Vo with her mother, and cut because we wanted to make a train that moved fast, and we had a 2-hour and 6-minute movie. And frankly, the addition of those backstory, it was very well. I like the scenes, but they detour. And when you detour in a film like this, sometimes it doesn't get there. It's too much for an audience. Sometimes it wasn't made like that. So we had to cut a lot of scenes. But we wrote them, and I remember one important thing was everyone in the press, when the book came out, they'd always said, the girl gets kidnapped. So automatically you lose that surprise element, correct? Everyone in the audience presumably who sees the trailer or who reads the book or knows the girl gets kidnapped. It's always, and the press talks about it. That's one thing I don't appreciate anymore with the modern press, is that they love to tell things, spoilers they call them, and they give away. So we're faced with 3-act movie, and she isn't, in the original cut, she wasn't kidnapped until about an hour. And that's just too long to wander with the mother, the backstories, and this and that. So we made the decision to really try to trim that first act, get her kidnapped, and get this thing going. That was a big issue. And I think we got a decent pace on it. We also had to tell a little bit of a backstory about how they got rich, who these 2 young people were, how they got the money. So we did that in 2 different flashbacks. One flashback for Aaron. There was an Aaron flashback. Taylor was set up, his backstory was set up quickly as he was making love to Blake in the first, which is the first scene in the movie practically after we introduced Laguna Beach. It's on the title sequence. So we're going fast, and we're telling backstory fast. And presumably people, they're going to learn a lot fast because you got to get in a certain amount of information to keep going. So those were the big challenges. Voiceover, constant work. She hates it, but constantly reworking voiceover, redoing it, sharpening it. It's very important. Voiceover is like music. It works in counterpoint to what's happening. And I think of it as music. And I've used a lot of voiceover in movies. What were some other issues? There were 3 heists. There were 3 different heists of them. They tried to get the money back that way. But after one successful heist, I felt like it was becoming repetitive. And it wasn't, I don't want to just do an action movie about heists, so I wanted to rush it. So after the heist works, immediately unlike the book, the gang, the cartel figures starts to question everybody because they're very uptight about this. That leads immediately to Ben and the young men having to take a counteraction, and the counteraction is to give up Demian Bashir, Alex, to the cartel. So those are choices that were made. They're not in the book, that scene. It's not done the same way. So everything moves faster in the movie. That's one thing I can tell you. If you read a book, you're reading it over a period of hours, different places. If you see a movie, you only have 2 hours to make your point. So we used that device to, and the whipping was not in the book either. That was something that I heard about in Mexico, and I wanted to see, because you don't see whippings on the screen. And at the same time, it's a crucial scene because it's a scene in which Aaron, as I explained earlier, crosses over to being a brutal killer. He crosses the line, and he kills for sure. At this point, he feels like his soul is hostaged. And also, Blake, if you remember correctly in the movie, that was not in the book. Blake is raped. She's raped by Benicio. She's raped, but she doesn't know she's been raped because she's so drugged with sedatives that later in the movie, when she's about to go home, Benicio brings her a video and shows it to her. So all this stuff is new territory, and it's a subtle reminder that she too has been compromised and owes, and he'll come back when he wants into her life, which sets up the fantasy ending where she shoots him in the groin and gets her revenge in her head. That's some of the other problems were, well, we cut a lot of characters. In the book, the reveal, in the book, the way the police, for example, in the book, the John Travolta character commits suicide. He doesn't really add up to much. He isn't a big player. In this movie, we wanted to make him a big player because he's smart. The moment he fucks everybody. He instigates the whole thing. He sets up the kids. He also comes back, and once Benicio figures it out, he sets up Benicio. He uses Benicio very well in that scene where they circle each other, and he agrees to sell the boys out, and then he ends up selling the boys out, gets the $3 million, and he sells Benicio out. So he's a very clever man, and then not only that, he comes back at the very end in the helicopter and arrests Salma. Arresting Salma gives him permission to, gives him the clout, the power to not only make a lot of money, but to grow in power in the DEA authority and become a big shot in Southern California. So he's a very smart operator. Salma takes the fall in the movie. She's the only one who takes the fall. She's compromised by her daughter. So I'm giving you a rough idea of how we tied 6 people together through all their vulnerabilities. Salma with her daughter, John with his need for money, Benicio for his need for power, his distrust of Salma, et cetera, et cetera. And I like all the way these relationships played out like clockwork. If you really examine it in the book and the movie, you will see quite a bit of difference. Because in the book, there's a lot of different characters and so forth, and this ending is not believable. The boy's identity is given away by, for example, a gun. They trace the gun bullets to an arms supplier in Southern California who gives them the information. But we haven't met the arms supplier, he comes in late in the book, and he doesn't. It's just it's a freak accident. It's the way things happen in real life, but it's a freaky accident. In a movie, you want to keep it tight. You want to try to keep the action within a certain limited amount of characters. So we didn't introduce new characters late in the movie. On this Wall Street movie, God, that goes back in time. But as I said yesterday, it was a morality tale. Charlie Sheen comes from a good stock, but his father is a working man, and he in Queens, a union man. And Charlie loves the glamour and the glitz and the power of the New York City brokerage houses. He ends up there. And although they have a close relationship where he borrows money from his father, and you see that he has a different path in mind. And that path conflicts with his father. He falls in thrall to Gecko, who is, in a sense, an alternative to his father, a stronger father. And he falls in love with all the wrong things. Gecko sets him up with a girlfriend, a blonde, who played by Daryl Hannah, who is one of Gecko's allies, but ends up falling for Charlie. And there's a nice little moment when she tells him that. Charlie doesn't believe her. He throws it all up when he finds out that Gecko is going to rape his father's airline, screw him over, and he tries to go straight. He goes straight, and he basically gets even with Gecko by sacrificing himself. He's going to jail at the end of the movie. Gecko apparently is going down. Insider trading is hard to prove, so Gecko is going to jail for a while. Charlie is going to do a little time in jail and hopefully straighten out and come back to the street. But when we came back to the second movie 20-some years later, we have Charlie come back, but I changed my mind. He didn't come back straight because Charlie, in his own life, took a few curves, as you know. Charlie always liked money, personally. That was his thing, money and babes. And so when he...
Charlie or bad?
So at the end of this movie, the second movie, we see him briefly at the Metropolitan Museum, and he's become Charlie Sheen. Very slick character, and I think you get a sense of what he's become. But that's life. Listen, I can't tell, that's a long analysis, long question, but I think we have to kind of keep it briefer, if you don't mind.